Hey folks, it's Frithgar here, how you doing? Welcome back to Farming Simulator 19 here in Boulder Canyon. I'm just going to finish reversing this one into the shed where we left it last time. Then I'm going to get that sprayer and we are going to go racing off around the field enthusiastically with the sprayer, getting spray on the field. We need to get the herbicide done because our field has partly grown. And if we leave it until tomorrow morning, there is a very good chance that we're going to be, we're going to have advanced further than what I want to advance, and we're going to wind up not being able to drive on the crop. Now, we can change over, of course, and we can put the care wheels on this tractor, so we could do that, but I don't really want to. I don't really want to mess around with doing that. I'd rather just get the job done now. So we will do it right now. Hopefully this will work. I've not actually tried doing this without with GPS system before. Not on this map, I don't think. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I have or I haven't. Anyway, not that it really matters. Let's get going with it. We're going to just pull that one over there a little bit, like that, and then we can start down across the field. And you can see it's already getting rid of some of the fertilizer on there. So what I'm going to do is we're going to get it heading down this direction like that. And then I do Alt-C to engage that one. And then Alt-E, and you've got to press Alt-E twice for some strange reason. I have no idea why. And let that one just go out. It's just got to stretch out a little bit. I don't know exactly how far you're supposed to go with it, but it doesn't really matter, I don't think, just as long as you get it somewhere. Press Alt-E again to stop that, and now we've got the little marks out here. See, you've got the orange ones, the white in the middle, orange again. Then it's Control-S to access the menu here. We auto-width that one to 68.9 feet. Now, what I normally do is to make the width increment right there quite small. 0.03 on a width increment, and then I lower it. So I press the minus number on here, look. And that drops that down a little bit. So it's 0.3 of a foot. So I've now gone down by 0.1 of a foot. And I'll take that down to about 0.5, I think, there, like that. Just so that you don't have any issues with overlap or anything like that. So we can press escape from there. Because sometimes, not always, but sometimes you can get issues with it doesn't quite overlap properly. Although that does happen more when you're on the side of a hill rather than on flat land down here. This being nice and level down here, it's unlikely that we would have any issues anyway. But it's definitely worth a shot. You may notice that I'm sounding a little bit more... I'm full of cold again. I thought that getting rid of this, the bad tooth that I got rid of at the end of last year would solve all of my issues for getting colds, and it did mostly solve it. However, there is one other thing that you do need to take into account when it comes to getting colds. It's easy enough to get rid of the tooth that was causing me some long-term health problems. That was fine. But getting rid of the children that continuously cause long-term health problems, that's usually frowned upon. So the children have to stay, which means that they run off to school and they expose themselves to every single virus known to man, and they gather them all up enthusiastically and they bring them home and they share them with you. It's very kind of them. So one of my kids has been, actually both of them are coming down with it now, they've been running around for the last week with snot coming out of just about every orifice that's possible. It's actually worse than it sounds. It is. I assure you, it is worse than it sounds. I'm just sharing a little tiny bit of the picture with you, but the bigger picture is even more horrific. Right? It's just genuinely horrifying. Small children with colds. There seems to be something about a small child with a cold. They turn into some sort of snot-dripping creature. It's like they've read The Monster from the Black Lagoon or something like that, and they thought, right, I can one-up this. I can do better than this. And so that's been my kids for the last few days. It's been wonderful. So I've been eyeing them up with extreme distaste, thinking, yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to avoid this. And it turns out that I haven't been able to avoid it. So I now have a bit of a cold. Hopefully it's not going to be anything more than just slight unpleasantness for a week or two. It's normally 10 days. Normally it's 10 days. But so far I haven't had any nasty... because what I was getting was I'd get a cold and then it would sort of develop into a chest infection. And I'm hoping that stage is now avoided because of the whole removing the tooth that I had done last year. And for those of you who don't know, and you're getting a now rundown on my medical history, which is not really what you tuned in for, is it? But I mean, we're doing a rather dull and slow job here, so I've got to talk about anything I can think of. Basically, I had a tooth that I wasn't aware that was causing me problems. I wasn't aware that it had a very slight infection under the tooth. One of the teeth, one of the molars at the back. And I didn't know that it was causing me issues. I didn't realize that there was any sort of problem with this particular tooth. But I went to hospital to have some things investigated, to have teeth investigated, and they took X-rays and they said, well, this tooth here has actually got an infection under it, and that's what's causing all your problems. And it also, because it's had an infection under it for like a year. That is also the reason why I've been getting a lot of bad colds, and every time I get a cold, it's been over the last 12 months, or 12 months or so, it seems to always develop into a really, really bad chest infection as well, which was confusing me and worrying me a little bit, because I don't, up until a year ago, there's never something that would happen. I'd have a cold, by all means, I have kids. Having kids and getting colds is sort of it all goes arm in arm. That those things are tied inexorably together. There's not a lot that you can do about it. But I was starting to get a bit concerned that they kept developing into chest infections. I mean, yes, I do admittedly spend most of my days in a darkened room sat in front of a computer. So that doesn't help the situation in the slightest. And it should also be noted that there's now a lot of evidence to suggest that you are going to get colds if you don't get very much vitamin D. And because I spend so much time sat in a darkened room, and I live in the UK, especially in the winter, I am very likely going to develop some issues, because in the UK you don't get exposed to a lot of sunlight in summer. It's not something that happens. In summer, in the winter, you don't get that much in the summer either, to be honest. But no, in the winter, you don't get exposed to much in the way of sunlight at all. We're very, very weak sunshine here in this country, and it's sort of known that you don't get very much exposure to sunlight, so you don't get very much vitamin D. And it is recommended that you take a vitamin D supplement, and that can actually help with colds and stuff. People, when I was a kid, it always used to be vitamin C. Everybody used to say, oh, you've got to take vitamin C tablets, but apparently those don't really do a lot. But vitamin D can help in the right circumstances. However, the best thing you can do is spend more time outside. So I am trying to spend more time outside, certainly at the weekends when I can, than I have been previously, and I'm hoping that it's going to start making a difference. I mean, it's not sort of been a life-altering difference yet, but I'm hoping that it will slowly improve over time. Fortunately, we don't have to worry too much about lack of sunshine in this particular series, because the sun always seems to be shining. Look at it. It's 7 o'clock in the evening and the sun is blazing. We've got 1 hour on the clock. That is all we've got left, so we need to be able to finish this in 1 hour. We're not doing too bad, actually. We're doing pretty well with this. We've got one more pass down through here. It's a long pass now, right the way down across, and then we've got, well, it is actually the bigger part of the field. Unfortunately, because we don't have any weeds come through, we can't just press the get the hired help to go and do it, because the hired help doesn't cooperate with us like that, which is something that I've always found to be a bit annoying, in that you cannot preemptively treat weeds with the hired help. Now, I do know that in real life you can get a pre-emergent weed control. You can put it down and it will basically kill the weeds as they come up through. It sort of does treat them. However, a lot of farmers report limited success with it. I've even had people commenting on the videos saying sort of the pre-treatment weed killers, that they're very, very little success with them, and some of them, they just don't work at all for different farms. I mean, I can well imagine that, because it must be a pretty noxious cocktail of chemicals if you're able to spray it on the ground and then just leave it there for a few weeks and it kill the things that come up through. So, and it does have to be a fairly well-tailored one to target only the plants that you want coming up. So quite a few people have said that it's somewhat limited in its use and success, and therefore they don't generally use it. They will generally wait until the weeds come up through, and then they will apply a herbicide if they're going to be applying herbicides. Which is fair enough, you know, the sort of thing you'd expect, really. And I would imagine that, whenever I've talked about putting on a preventative herbicide rather than a treatment herbicide, it's always been, I know that it's done, I know that it does happen, but it's always sort of there in the back of my mind that this probably the least desirable option when it comes to putting any kind of sprays on your field. Me personally, I've never been one for putting sprays on fields anyway. I've never really liked the idea of spraying a load of chemicals around, and I would personally in real life try to find alternative methods of doing it. A lot of sprayers in this country, it's not, you're not just, when they're spraying on the fields, you don't just see them spraying herbicide and insecticides and fungicides and stuff like that onto the crops. What you're also seeing them spray is fertilizer. They do put quite a bit of fertilizer on as well, like that. Nitrogen mostly, but there are other fertilizers they put on as well. However, there is a lot of treatments that are done, and I think probably fungicide is the most common one to put on. There are some herbicides that are used, and there are also some insecticides that are used. On a sort of scale, personally, I don't like insecticides at all. And I know that there are circumstances where they do kind of need to be used, unless you're doing organic farming. There are circumstances where they need to be used, because certain populations of insects who will feed exclusively on the cereal that you're growing, it's going to cause a population explosion, and it can't be controlled through natural means. So sometimes it's necessary. However, it's a necessity that I really, really don't like. I've never liked insecticides not at all. I've never, ever liked insecticides of any kind. I used to keep bees. I don't keep bees anymore. And being a beekeeper, the whole idea of spraying vast quantities of chemicals to kill off insects just doesn't sit well with me. I've never, ever liked it. And I never will. I'm never going to like it. And if there are alternatives available, then I would prefer to use those. But I'm not a farmer. I don't have a farm these days. I've never owned a farm myself personally. If I ever get to the point where I'm able to get a small holding and have a few acres of land, I won't be putting insecticide on the crops. That I know for certain. There are some fungicides that are used for treating. There's a whole range of diseases that the plants get that are treated with fungicides. Those, I'm much more open to something like that being used to sort of treat these various illnesses that the plants get. Me personally, I prefer an organic approach. However, the practicality, excuse me, the practicalities of an organic approach to farming are not always very good. Organic sounds wonderful on paper. Right, you write out a paper and you talk about the wonders of organic farming, and it sounds absolutely wonderful. Putting it into practice is altogether different. Organic sheep and beef, organic dairy, that is something that I have been involved with quite a bit. Not dairy so much, but sheep and beef, yes, I've been involved with a lot of organic sheep and beef. Also in places where they're not actually registered as organic, because they'll go and grab a little bit of fertilizer in the summer and chuck it on the grass that they're then going to mow to give to the sheep, and they give the sheep the occasional bit of drench and things like that to treat them for worms. And Other things along those lines that you're not allowed to do with organic, or you've got to use more expensive versions and so on. But yeah, like the farming that I've been involved with sheep and beef, generally for the most part, there's very, very little involved with keeping the animals that you wouldn't really class as organic anyway. So organic stock is altogether different to growing organic crops. Organic crops, if you have a big crop rotation, if you have a lot of different crops rotating, then it's a lot easier. It's you get better results. You get much better results with it. However, there is still quite a significant penalty to pay when you're doing organic crops. It really does make quite a big difference. So I can really appreciate crops. It's not something that is very, very easy to do. It's quite a challenge to grow crops organically. And so I do understand that. So yes, I have a distaste for the sprays that go onto the fields, but I also understand the necessities of those sprays. If I was in a position where I had a small holding and I could grow some of my own crop, you know, it would be a luxury activity, wouldn't it? It's not something that my livelihood would rely upon, and that makes a big difference. That does make a big difference. When it becomes a luxury activity, you're free to choose however you want to do it. I don't at the moment, but I have had vegetable gardens before now. I choose to grow my vegetables through organic means. I don't put any chemicals or artificial fertilizers on them at all. And that's just the way that I choose to do it, because I have the luxury to be able to do that. So don't think that I'm now preaching that anything but organic is wrong. I'm definitely not. I fully understand the necessities for various sprays and that. I do think... Do I think that some farmers apply sprays unnecessarily and do it where it's not really needed? Yes, absolutely, of course. Farmers are not... farmers are people, the same as everybody else. There's always going to be some farmers that will do things that make you think, what on earth were you thinking? And then there are going to be other farmers that will do things that you think, well, that is actually really, really awesome. I respect and salute you, sir. You know, they're just the same as everybody else. And I'm sort of talking a bit like this because I have seen quite a few things lately on different websites, in particular Twitter. Because it's January, we've got this whole veganuary thing going on, where people try to just eat vegan diets for the month of January, and I don't particularly like that, because certainly I can go on what I know for here in the UK. The vegan options that are available in the UK, and it's all about, mostly the biggest argument is carbon footprint, and I can understand. You've got two different types of vegans. You've got vegans who just don't want to I'm just trying to think the best way to work. You've got environmental vegans who do it for the whole carbon footprint thing, and you've got ethical vegans who do it for what they believe is right concerning the animals. Now, those are two very, very different outlooks and approaches. An ethical vegan is someone who will try to avoid using anything from an animal. They won't have wool items, they won't have leather items, and nothing that comes from an animal, right? It's right the way down to, it's a core belief. Whereas the other type, the environmental one, will use leather and so on as an animal byproduct. And now, I'm very much generalizing, I'm very aware of that, and this discussion could go on for weeks. It absolutely could. But here in the UK, being a vegan is not such a big environmental impact as it is in some other places. Most of our beef and sheep that is produced in this country is produced on grassland that is not fit for any other kind of crops. You can't grow other crops on the grasslands and the like the highlands and the uplands that are used for rearing the beef and sheep. You can't use that for any other animal, any any crops, right? It doesn't grow crops. It doesn't support the growth of crops, which is why they've traditionally always put animals up onto these uplands, because it just doesn't support growing crops. You can't, you literally, you cannot grow crops on that land, and so they put beef and sheep up there instead, and they just let them grow on the grass, and then when they've eaten enough grass, they bring them in and they send them off to market. Now, you may get a little bit of corn supplement given to them as they approach the point where they're sending them off to market, but not very much. It's pretty much all grass, and that's a big difference. That's what makes the big difference. Look, it's 8 o'clock. We've got to stop. Let's turn the lights off. It's bedtime. We cannot work past 8 o'clock. So that's the big difference, is that because it's all grass-fed, I want to go to 11 hours sleep like that, you end up with a lot less in the way of environmental impact. If you were fattening them all on grain, which is a method that is used in other parts of the world, then yes, it's different. That makes a different kind of impact. It impacts everything differently. Feeding everything on grain is definitely going to make a huge impact compared to feeding everything on grass, especially when it's grass that is grown in an area that can't support grain. It doesn't. You literally, you can't grow grain in those areas, and that makes a huge difference. And also, the crops that you need to grow in order to replace a meat-based diet, in order to get the appropriate amount of proteins, they don't grow everywhere in the UK, all right? They're not able to grow everywhere in the UK because of the varied rainfall that we get in different areas. So the distance is travelled and the processing and so on that is involved with doing it, even if you really work hard, and you've actually got to work really hard to source all of your food from the UK if you're going to be a vegan. It's more difficult than I realised. I didn't realise it was as difficult as it is. You can do it, don't get me wrong, it is possible to do it. I'm not saying it's not possible to do it. You can do it, but it is more difficult than I thought. And as a result, it means that the average carbon footprint of a person who's decided to go fully vegan in the UK is not very different to the average carbon footprint of someone who is not a vegan. So there's a big sort of difference between there's huge variation in the country that you live in for whether or not being a vegan is going to make a massive environmental impact. Now, I realise that this is going dangerously close to being a political topic today, because veganism is becoming increasingly a political thing, which I don't like. I don't think it should be. You know, it's a personal choice, and it's also a diet-based choice. I know people that are vegan because they're unable to consume any dairy, and they don't like meat. They literally just don't like the taste of meat, so they choose not to eat meat, and they can't eat dairy anyway because they're intolerant of dairy. It's that sort of thing and then I know other people who are vegetarian and who choose for the most part to not consume any products from animals either. I say for the most part, they do still consume some products from animals. And you got things like alternatives to milk, for like vegan alternatives to milk. And the one that I really don't like, the milk that I really don't like, the alternative is almond milk. Right? I really, really dislike almond milk because it's nothing to do with the taste or anything. I've never tried it, and I never will. I'm never going to let a drop of that stuff pass my lips because of the way it's produced. Right? The mass production, the majority of almond milk is produced in California, in massive, great big plantations there. And the bees that are brought in every year, and there is a growing body of evidence to show just how damaging that is, just for the bees alone. But there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of acres of land that is given over to the farming of the almond trees, and it's monoculture. It's monoculture on a mind-numbing scale, and that kind of thing is not good for the environment in any way, shape or form. A monoculture is never good for the environment. So just almond trees and nothing else as far as the eye can see in any direction, that's not a good thing for the environment at all. And something that I've always felt goes hand in hand with farming, and it's always gone hand in hand with any farming that I've been involved with, is maintaining the environment, is looking after the environment around you. Every farm I've worked on, the hedgerows have been absolutely rich with life, and insects, birds, animals, everything, all the way through. And it just seems wrong to be doing any type of farming that doesn't sort of push that. Now, I worked on a big farm. I worked on a big arable farm for a time, and they... Oh dear. That's not supposed to happen. I went in too far. I should have tipped it out here. That's what I should have done. Yeah, they had... No, I just went too far in. There's no way I'm ever going to be able to pick that grain up now. They're stuck in there forever. Right, well, never mind. Yeah, they had all kinds of stewardship schemes and that were going on. So, I mean, yeah, they were getting paid to do it. But there was still things going on around the edges of the fields, and they would leave strips on the fields for years at a time to establish different sort of rare plants and things like that. And it was absolutely wonderful. You go to some of the places that they'd sort of established these various different schemes, and it was rich with life. It was wonderful. And there's a lot of farms that do work like... I mean, yes, there are ones that don't. But I guess the thing I've been seeing a lot of anti-farming stuff of late, and I don't like to see that, because regardless of your personal opinion of an actual farmer, they still produce all the food that we eat. Farmers do produce all the food that we eat, and so farmers aren't out to kill us all. And sometimes I get the impression, I mean, yes, I do sometimes make the mistake of looking on Twitter and reading the comments on Twitter. Never read the comments on Twitter. The comments on Twitter are just going to make you lose complete faith in humanity forever. But it just seems that so many people are convinced that farmers are the enemy and they're out to kill everybody around. No, they're not. A lot of farmers just want to make a living. Right? That's all they want to do. They just want to make a living. And yes, there are going to be bad eggs in among them who would rather make money over anything else. But the majority of farmers that I've ever had the pleasure of working with or working for are not like that. They want to see nice things in the hedgerows. They want to see the plants and the animals all around them sort of working with their farm. Because there are huge numbers of benefits to having all these wild plants and insects and everything all around your farm, rather than just having one big dead area that is a huge monoculture. And it's... you end up feeling quite sad, really, because of the way that farmers are being vilified so much, and just, yeah, it doesn't feel right. It absolutely doesn't feel right. But anyway, enough about that. I try to avoid talking about anything to do political, and I'm sort of getting dangerously towards political at the moment. So I will say no more on the subject. But yeah, if you're reading these things on the internet about farmers doing this and farmers doing that and not caring about the environment, take it with a pinch of salt. Take that with a pinch of salt and do a little bit of background research. Don't just copy and paste something that you see on Facebook about how farmers are terrible and or on Twitter. Just read into it a little bit first and do a little bit of research first before it starts getting spread around as fact. Because if you see something enough times, it doesn't matter who you are. If you read something enough times, you start to take it as fact. And that is known. That's why these things get spread around, because enough people see them and they start to take them as fact, even when they're not. And even people who know they're not fact, you see it enough times. If you're told something enough times, you start to believe it. So my advice to you is don't. Don't believe everything you read. Do some research. Look at, get references and research it a bit first, and then understand what it is that you're reading. That would be my advice. But anyway, enough on this sordid, sorry tale and subject. I won't come back to it, at least not in the near future. We will focus on other things. We've got our herbicide all sprayed now. That is all done. We have gone forward a day. We've got the crop is growing nicely. We've got everything on the crop that we could possibly want. We will go through to here. It's a split growth for some strange reason. I think it's just because of the way that it was planted. There was a tiny little bit of weed right there and there, but that's nothing. That's minor detail. We don't care about that. So the next thing we're going to be doing is going up there. We've got a load of trees already cut down, so we may get some of those. We've got tree stumps that we need to pick up, and I did actually get it ready for today's episode, although we haven't used it. These over here, I got some trees. I got some trees ready to plant so that we can put them down along the bank. It's just we've run out of time. We've gone way over time today. So yeah, if you've enjoyed the episode, then please head down below and give us a like. And if you really enjoyed it, then please tell your friends all about me. Get them to come and watch as well. That would be awesome. And until next time, thank you very much for watching. This is Frithgar. Goodbye, and see you later.